Welcome everybody to another episode of the Growth Focus podcast, where we bring together tech leaders from all across the globe to talk about tech, to talk about entrepreneurship, inspiration and empowerment. My name is Gary Lafferty, your host, and today I am extremely excited to have Blake Marvin with us, founder and CEO of Avajen, and we're going to be talking about his journey, what got him to where he was today, and believe you me, when we were talking off camera, this is a really fascinating story, so you want to be hanging around for that, and the differences that he makes with his company that sets him apart from the masses that are out there. So make sure you stay to the very end, because Blake's got some really great insights and nuggets to share. So without further ado, Blake, it's great to have you. Why don't we start off with you introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your story of where you were to where you are today.
Yeah, sure, you bet. So Blake Marvin, like you said, founder, CEO of Avajen. Been at it for about 22 years in the IT space. I should say that in a professional manner. I've been doing this really since I was a kid. I think we talked a little bit earlier about when I was 12 years old when I decided I wanted to start and run my own IT business. And, at that time I was like, well, I'll just do it right now. And so I started my first business at 12 and started building computers. Back then I was, kind of Michael Dell inspired, if you will. I'm gonna be the next Dell, and we're gonna build computers, and I'm gonna start right here in my parents' basement. And that worked out great for a while. I built an awful lot of computers when I was a kid. I think by the time I got out of high school, it was close to 1,000 computers that I had bought and sold and built, and basically transformed my parents' basement into a little assembly line, a little factory for building computers, and that was kind of the start of Blake wanting to be an entrepreneur, Blake wanting to do something in business, and then loving tech all along the way.
So that was really the Blake Entrepreneur 1.0. That's where it actually started, and it really at a young age as well. So before we move forward down your timeline, let's just touch on that a little bit. Do you believe that in order to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to start young, or do you think that's something in your blood? But what was that motivation from that to where you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, honestly, everyone has a different journey, different path. We learn about ourselves at a different pace. And, there's other people that I watch that I'm like, man, if only I'd figured out what I was doing in this area a little bit sooner, I could be where that guy is, and that kind of thing. And I think that's a dangerous path to go down. Don't compare your timeline with other people's. It's more important to just recognize in the moment, what is it you should be doing today? What is it that you want to be doing tomorrow? Forget where you're at in your, chronology of your life, because we're all on a different path. But I've known very successful people that started in their 30s, 40s, and literally switched careers and started something brand new and were highly successful in it, and even older. And obviously then there's people like me that are like, I want to do computers from the time I'm a little kid, and here I am a little bit older doing computers. But I don't think there's any one size fits all, but I do think it's important to constantly be looking at your life, looking at what you're doing and saying, is this where I wanted to be right now? Am I on the path to where I'm trying to be and the things I'm trying to do in life and for the world and for other people? And if you're, thinking about things like that on a constant basis, and doing that gut check and that self checkup of, is the stuff that I'm doing fulfilling me? Is it fulfilling my family? The things that I said I was going to do for the world, am I doing those things? And if the answer is no, then maybe time to make a change. Maybe time to talk to somebody else.
Agree. Like you said, it's looking inside you and seeing where you want to be on this planet, where you want to be on this timeline, as opposed to, as I say, comparison is the thief of joy. If you're comparing yourself to other people, you're always going to see yourself behind, and therefore you're always going to see yourself as the underdog rather than the striver, the person that's actually going to sort of push the boundaries and get to where you want to be. So with that being said, you started early in computers. You're still in tech at a very high level. We're going to talk about that in a minute. There was this middle part of your life, wasn't there? There's this where you followed a route and then decided, nah, this is not the route I wanted to be on. Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's actually been a few of those, and I expect more, especially given my choice in marriage and so on and so forth. I'll tell you more about my lovely wife, but um, I had a pretty successful career in IT early on. At 25, I was the CTO of an MSP in Colorado, doing pretty well. Making good money. I had a nice house in a nice part of town, driving the right cars, all the things that you typically associate with the American dream. I was doing that. I had that, and I went home one day, and my wife looked at me, and what you don't know is we met because we were actually both musicians as well. So I've had two parallel paths, growing up. I loved computers, obviously, but I also loved singing, believe it or not, and was always kind of known in the circles of people that knew me as a singer. I grew up singing in front of a lot of people, and when my wife, when I got home that one night, my wife said, I don't know what we're doing with life. This isn't what we should be doing. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And she said, we're musicians. What are we doing? We need to make some music. And I paused. I was like, okay, well, what do you mean by that exactly? And she's like, well, we should start a band again. And one thing that anybody that knows me very well knows that my wife and I both, if we decide we're going to go after something, we don't just kind of go after it. We put all feet in. We just dive in head first. In this particular case, in that night, we decided we were going to start a band. We were going to sell everything we owned. We were going to move to Nashville, Tennessee, and we were going to make a go at music. And that's kind of a very random, very quick thing that most people probably wouldn't do, especially given what we had made it to. It's like, well, we could just keep on this trajectory, and we're going to be doing great. And we did that. And we sold everything. We went to Nashville, got a house out there, used the money from our house to buy a bus, to buy a sound system, and we started auditioning people. And a couple months later, we had a band. We had we used some of the money to make a recording. Hired the right people so the recording sounded good, and then we went after it. And so that was our next 6 years basically. We toured all over the country, and we played about 175 shows a year, and made decent money. Playing as a band. We had some label attention, and it was really, really awesome. It was also
so
one of the hardest things we ever
Blake,
did.
isn't it? It's such a diverse from where you were. As you say, you got to the CTO, you're living the American dream, you're living with that, just what people would look upon you and go, he's made it. Look at that couple there. They're absolutely fantastic. We're going to throw it all away to a degree and do something completely different. But I also think, as risky as that is, from an entrepreneur's point of view, I definitely see success, and people in success are those who make up their minds quickly and change it slowly. And that's exactly what it seems you did there. You just made it up quickly that night. Boom, we're selling, we're buying a bus, we're moving, we're going to move to a completely different place. We're going to go to Nashville, and we're going to start this whole career. And you did that for another 6 years. So I think it's okay to pivot. I think that there's a lot of people who listen here, whether it be entrepreneurs or in a career, that feel that because they've started on that path, they've got to stick to that path, because it's the only way. They've invested so much. And I think you're the living of it. No, you don't. You can actually pivot. You can change. You can, as long as you say, you're living what you want to live, and you're going towards a goal that you feel is right then.
Yeah. And not to say there's not consequences for those decisions. Every decision has a consequence, and you got to weigh them. But ultimately, if the thing you're doing today isn't the thing that's going to fulfill you, make a change.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the change again then. So you decided from there, the 6 years, 170 odd gigs every single year. That's got to be exhausting. In a bus, in a band. Definitely not what you were used to in the CTO corporate world. What was the impetus of the change again?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if my wife was here, the story sounds a little different too, because she'll tell you all about what it's like to live on a bus with 5 guys, and that's an interesting dynamic itself. Being married on a bus is also an interesting dynamic. And, someone that likes being married and wants to stay married, there's some challenges that come with that. But just in general, it's a much harder life. I can tell you this: if you think that people in that industry have it easy, they don't, and it's a very difficult industry. And I always had respect for folks that did that, especially at the professional level. I think my respect for them now is 10 times higher, knowing what it really takes to be a part of that industry and to do it well. Basically what we ended up finding was it was no longer a healthy environment for me, and I was trying to do too many things. I was actually still running an IT consultancy from the bus. I would sit in the front of the bus. Sometimes we were 30 hours from one show to the next, just us in the open road. Luckily, this was in the era where LTE was relatively available, so I could sit there in the front of the bus, and 90% of the time I had good enough cell signal I could log into a server somewhere and help somebody out with something. And so I would do that in the front of the bus, and then I started picking up bigger and bigger consultancy gigs, one of which carried me to San Diego. I was working with a large bank out there, building out their network operations center. And so what I ended up doing, I get to the point where I was flying. I lived in San Diego basically at that point. I had a condo there. I was wake up Monday morning, go to the bank, work on the things I was working on for them, do that all week long, and then Thursday or Friday, catch a plane, go meet the bus wherever they were in the country, and play shows all weekend, and then hop back on a plane, fly back, and be at the bank again Monday morning. And
like a weekend warrior band member, right?
Exactly, yeah. And it was really fun for a little bit. Doing that, for a second, I felt like a superhero trying to take on the world, doing all these things, and then all of a sudden it started settling in that, okay, I'm still just one guy. I can only do so much, and there was choices that had to be made. I either have to go this path or I have to go this path, because trying to do both at that level, at least at that point in life, without the additional support required to do that, to do it well, I needed to pick something. So, wife and I did some talking. Also, some of the band, our bandmates were getting offers from really, really big artists. And we were holding them because we were paying them more than the big artists, ironically. That was the reason they were sticking around. Well, and they liked their band, but it started becoming one of those things where it's like, well, are we holding these guys back? And also, are we holding ourselves back from something better? And so I think that switch was a little bit slower than the switch to go do it. But in about a period of 2 weeks, we said, it's time. We put in the effort. We did the thing. We got to a certain level. We were this close to getting to the level we wanted, but we also kind of saw that maybe that wasn't what we actually wanted. And so, so we pulled out of that. We still actually play some shows here and there when the band guys have time, and there's something fun to go do, which, they don't have as much time anymore because they're playing for like Morgan Wallen and people like that. And so, we get fit in wherever they have a minute. But we still do a little bit to keep us happy and keep us doing that. But now we're back to the real world, so to speak. And for me, the real world means let's get an IT company going. And
let's talk about that now. So let's talk about Avajen. What was the? Tell us what it did for those people out here who have not heard of what your company does, who it helps, what it serves. Why don't you just share some stuff with us? What do you bring to the marketplace? Who do you actually serve? And what are the challenges that you help them overcome?
Yeah. So we're a fully outsourced managed service provider, basically an outsourced IT department for anyone who doesn't know the MSP terminology. So anything you'd expect an IT department to do for a business, we do those things. And we basically help a lot of businesses not have to hire and internally train and get the right staff to be their IT department, especially a 30, 40, 50 to 100, maybe even a few hundred person company. Having those resources all internally is a challenge to do it right. You can find an IT guy, but really doing it right and doing it at the level that at least the clients that we have are expected to do it at is difficult and would be very expensive to do it the right way. So we kind of come in and operate from the whole gambit. We have your CTO level knowledge at the high level, and then we've got everything down to help desk, and we'll take care of it all. And most of the clients we work with are in regulated industries, so they have compliance that they have no choice. They have to do certain things. They have to check certain boxes. If they're not checking those boxes, they won't pass due diligence. They won't pass audits. They'll have trouble getting money. They'll have trouble getting insured. They'll potentially even get in trouble with government agencies. And so we make sure that all of those things are dealt with. And then we also just put in best practices to really help their business, not just think of IT as a cost center, but potentially a revenue driver. Really, we want to make sure that whatever the IT, whatever the technologies of your business are, they're in place in a way that drives your workflows and helps you to be more efficient and more effective at what you do, so you can make more money.
That's a really interesting point, because just listening to you there, I was about to ask about the ROI and how do you get the SMB market to understand the ROI of what they're actually doing. But I love what you just said there about rather being a cost to it, there is it can be a revenue driver. If they get it right, they can actually use it to push the needle where they need to do it. Let's talk a little bit about that. So can you explain a little bit more what you mean by that, and how you deal with those misconceptions these SMB markets have?
Yeah, sure. Even just in my own company, we do this all the time, but we help our clients to understand their own workflows a little bit better. So a lot of times this is, sitting down with the C-suite, if they have one, or whoever's, the executive leadership of the team, and figure out, what does your business really do? What are the core things that drive money into your business? And then now, as we look at your business as a whole, what are the things in your business that are getting in the way of that? What's slowing you down? Whether it's in your sales process, the way you collect money, any step of the way. What are your workflows? How do you get new business in the door? How do you make sure that business is being dealt with appropriately so that they want to pay you, and then invoicing them and getting the money back in your bank account? There's a lot of pieces that go along with that one process can drastically slow down your ability to either execute on establishing new deals, or execute on getting the money in the bank, and both of those things become problematic for your ability to grow and scale and do what you're in business to do. And so sometimes it's little small shifts. Hey, you're having to, on our side, for instance, a good example would be anything where there's double entry. This thing's over here, but we're manually typing it over here too. Why are you doing that? There's a computer can do that for you now. Or anything where there's copying files here to copy them there. There's a lot of redundancies that you'll find in our industry. And then you'll find things where they're just using old, slow systems that don't work very well. They're waiting for things, and there's idle time. Anytime there's idle time, someone's paying for that time. And so we try to find examples of those things going on. And that's not the core reason you hire us. Typically, most people come to us because they want to make sure they can pass their cybersecurity due diligence. But then while we're in there talking to them about cybersecurity due diligence, we might happen to notice someone sitting over there twiddling their thumbs. And, my first question is, if I was a CEO and I was paying for that guy to sit there, why is he sitting there twiddling his thumbs for, 30 minutes? And then you go over and ask him what he's up to. And, I'm just waiting on this thing to finish. Okay. And,
Well, it's you covered so much ground there in just those couple of minutes, and I just wanted to dial it back a little bit, because it's what we call the expert's curse. You do it all day long, so to you, you just rolls off the tongue. But there's so many great insights there which could really help people listening and watching from here. And I think the first and foremost is that it certainly seems that when you do your discovery, when you do your deep dive, you're doing a far bigger deep dive than most MSPs are doing. Rather than just going in and say, here's your product, where's your problem, this is how we solve that problem. Whereas you're looking far more into the needle movers of the business itself. And so how do people, and I know there's a follow-up question from this because we talked off air before, but how do people receive that deeper dive from you, that deeper care from you, compared to what they're used to in the marketplace?
As in, how do they like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, they love it. I think the short answer is most people, if you don't know how the MSP market typically works, the way that most MSPs operate, and I'm at DattoCon right now, which is an MSP specific conference here in Miami, and almost everybody here does this. So I'm not necessarily saying anything bad about the industry, but this is how it works. You come in and the way that you price a particular engagement with a particular client is you count things up. How many devices do you have? How many users do you have? And then we do a calculation. And based on the number of devices, number of users, here's your bill. This is what it's going to cost you month to month to have IT covered. And they might have a few different tiers. The different tiers might include different security options or a few different, help desk options, things like that. They kind of, everyone gets a little creative in their tiers. But that's essentially the way the billing model works. It's per endpoint or per user or a hybrid of both in almost all cases. We don't operate that way. And the reason we don't operate that way is because if I operate in that manner, it makes it so that it's not really in my best interest to offer you those things that I just said. Truly, if you look at just the numbers of the business, my best interest is to sell you that deal based on your quantities and walk away and do as little for you as I possibly can, as long as I'm meeting the criteria and the KPIs of that tier that you signed up for. In our case, I don't want to do that. I don't want to put myself in a position where my interests financially are better served by not helping you further. And so what we do is we have a model that you buy a block of time, and by buying that block of time, you're committing to at least that much. So it's a retainer, and then anything above and beyond that we'll still do. We don't charge extra for the above and beyond, but we don't guarantee the resource availability. But basically, with the way we do it, it's in our best interest to always be looking for things to do to better your business, because if we can't find something to better your business and there's and the retainer's up, like we're just we're not going to make any more money. And our goal, of course, is also to make money like everybody else. But we've incentivized our workers to be looking for ways to improve your business by changing our billing model to motivate us in that way.
Yeah, and I think this is a key element to the business and the industry, that when everyone else is zigging, you can zag. You don't have to follow the masses, because that's the way it's always done. And I'm sure you're having some really interesting conversations this week down there in Miami, because you got the MSPs going, well, this is the way it's always done, so this is the way we will always do it. And people don't mind change; they actually just mind being changed. And to try and get them to understand there's a different way of doing it, it's quite a challenge sometimes. And this is what has really helped you grow as a company. And the whole industry, this is my next, I want to state a fact here because I actually know it and I want people to understand this, is that the industry itself predominantly relies upon networking and referrals to grow. And I'm sure there's a majority of people out there who are doing it. But in your industry, in your particular company, you have a very, very, very sought after record about your referrals, don't you? Do you want to share that with us?
Yeah, it's basically about 100% referrals. So we started with one company. The guy from that company introduced us to another guy. That company introduced us to another guy. Then we actually got our first really big client. And that client has introduced us now to a ton of other clients. And now we're starting to see, again, some of their introductions have spidered off into some others. Literally, this morning I got an email from one that, it's the a friend of one of the guys from that big company's referrals. So it's another, two steps out, and the company that they referred us to, and that they're very interested in working with us, is a very large company. So we're excited to have that discussion. So yeah, it's interesting. I'd say probably half of the discussion going on at this conference right now is about how do you organically find new leads and how do you prevent churn. And I'll knock on wood when I say this one too, because we also haven't had any clients leave yet. We're a young enough company that that's not crazy, but also we're 4 years old almost, and we haven't had any clients leave yet. So kind of, I think that speaks some volumes too when I hear some of these groups talking about 10% loss year over year, and I'm going, wow, that's crazy. I couldn't imagine that with with the clients we have. We're not anywhere close. I mean, we haven't had one leave. So
yeah, that's some impressive facts there from you, Blake. And I think it's funny to hear you say this, because people say, 5%, 6%, 10% churn. They're almost accepting it as if it's oxygen. This is just what happens in our industry, and But I think what's really come to the fore today, listening to you, is that just because everyone else is doing it that way, it doesn't mean you have to accept the status quo.
Yeah.
If you want to move, you want to grow, you want to make a difference, what you have proven is not just in the success of your company, but clients do like it. Otherwise, they wouldn't refer. Some of them will keep it as a secret. Oh, I love Blake and the Blake way they're doing it. But they're reaching out to their friends and their colleagues to say, hey, look, this guy's zigging. When everyone else is zagging, this guy's zigging. You should pay attention to this guy. And that is a really big lesson that people are probably too scared to listen to. And if they do listen to it, they're probably even more scared to actually step foot into that realm of doing something different. You probably know that listening to you, what you've done. But what is your view on taking those bolder steps that people are too afraid to take?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's bold has always been something that I've never been afraid of. I'm not afraid to challenge the status quo, but and I think most people really shouldn't be. But it is scary. You're the one guy. There's a couple thousand people here at this conference, and I'm probably the one guy here doing it the way I'm doing it. Maybe there's a couple more. I haven't met them yet, and kudos to them if they're over there. But the one thing I think I've learned just watching history is if you really want to make a difference, you can't do the same thing everyone else is doing, or at least not exactly. Usually there's something better that can be done, and I think that was something that I spent a pretty good amount of time thinking through as I was starting up Avajen. I was like, okay, there's a lot of MSPs out there. If I'm gonna differentiate myself, I'm going to do something more than just show up and say, hey, I can make sure your servers are up to date and your systems are working. How am I going to do what I do differently in a way that maybe not only impacts that one customer, but possibly shows the industry, the greater whole, that maybe there's a better way to do things, and as it potentially catches on, maybe we can all do a better job for all of the companies and just improve the whole industry. And not to say that the exact way I'm doing it is the way everybody should do it, but maybe it'll at least open some eyes as to, hey, there's different ways, and maybe we should get a little bit creative in how we can still make money. Everybody here wants to make money. I get that. We need to make money to be a business, and also how can we do it in a way that truly checks all the boxes that we could check for our clients, not just the ones we have to check to be true to our contracts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and this is why I love talking to you before, Blair, because, from my industry, before I sold my company, I constantly looked outside of my industry. I thought, what are they doing that my industry is not doing, that I could bring in to this and make it work? And yes, you might be the Lone Ranger out there doing it, But if you, in a world there, as you say, there's so many MSPs, there's so many VARs, there's so many of these resellers in there. There is, for people who don't know, I did some research for a conference I was at last week, and in the US alone, there are over 482,000 independent IT tech and tech consultancies out there. So there is a really, really big market for you to stand out in. Otherwise, you just get caught in this sea of sameness, as I call it, because to the industry, you just look the same as everybody else. Yeah. And you've got to do something different. Otherwise, as you quite rightly said, everyone's heard of the phrase, you've got to do something different and not do what everyone else does. But no one does that. They just continue doing what everything else does. And that's what makes people different.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And honestly, it's kind of funny when you say that. One of the things I noticed at this conference in particular, and I think most of them are about the same in this, is there's a bigger machine kind of that drives a lot of this, and that's what actually makes it harder to fight back against a little bit, because all of these groups come together. They all sell the stuff to the MSPs. So the software that we as MSPs use, the tool sets that we use, they're sold by the endpoint, by the user. The end user or the end endpoint, they're sold in a manner that also makes it almost kind of forces most MSPs into that model. The only way I can make my money back reliably is to then just pass that cost on to the client and then add a percent, and that's how we come to our per seat costs. And I think by figuring out creative ways to absorb that per user, per device into our company, and then not necessarily have a direct pass through to the client, make it so that our billable to the client is more centered around what are we doing for you, but still make sure that there's a healthy enough amount of money to cover all the appropriate expenses. That's been the thing that we've done differently, and it took some creativity, and frankly, it's something that still evolves. As the industry changes, as the tool sets we need change, we have to evolve our setup as well. But we've been able to keep doing that in a way that thinks about the customer's outcome first.
And that's exactly, I've been one of the ranting about that, well, not only with my clients, but with other people for years, is if you position yourself as outcome led first, as opposed to product or service led first, then you will come up with these ingenious ways to help your clients get more out of it, because you are outcome led. The products and service is the tool that gives you the outcome. So you might as well focus on the outcome as opposed to the tools and the services, because they are just the tools in your toolbox. And I think if the more people can think like that, and for those listening and watching from here, I would really encourage, just as Blake has been said here, is continuously look at different ways. It doesn't come overnight, but it will change overnight as well. What might be good for the goose today, it'll be different next year. But as we continuously grow, but always think about our clients and always think about the outcome that they are going to receive by working with us, that's what can differentiate you from the others that are out there. Now, you mentioned something earlier on, Blake, on a different note, that at some point in your career you realized, heck, I can't do this all by myself. I can't scale. I've got all the skills. I'm making the money, but I've still got 24 hours in the day. When it comes to building a team, I know a lot of people out there listening will go, number one, it's hard enough to find them, then to train them, then to retain them. Those three elements are always the top three things when it comes to our team. What words of wisdom could you share with us with regards to locating, finding, training, and retaining a team?
Yeah, it's great question. Something that, I think parts of that we're still, I think we'll constantly be evolving in, honestly. The world's not static. What was true yesterday about talent is not necessarily going to be true tomorrow. I'll say this. So 2020, I started Avajen again myself, just little old me running around fixing things. Knew that I wanted it to be bigger than that. Didn't exactly know the timing, how I was going to do it. I didn't come in with a bunch of outside money. I wanted to do it with my own money, at least in the beginning. And so, that obviously that immediately implies certain limitations on how fast I can grow right out of the gates. But COVID kind of helped me out of this. I hate to say that COVID helped me, but COVID helped me. I started it in January of 2019, just myself. And when April 2020 rolled around, my phone started blowing up because everybody in the, and their brother all of a sudden had businesses that had to go remote and they had no clue how to do that. This was, there was the start of the remote era, if you will. So I basically spent the next 6 to 8 months helping one company after the next get proficient at being remote in whatever capacities they could, depending on what they did, and the calls just kept on coming. And I think it was around November of 2020. I said, "This is my opportunity. I need to either start telling people no, because I can't take all the work that's coming to me, or I can go ahead and get that first guy." And obviously coming completely out of pocket on this, that was a little bit of a nervous moment. And I said, screw it, we're going to do this. So I put the job posting up on Indeed, and I made it the craziest job posting that you could ever imagine. There's no human being on earth that could actually do everything I put on this job post. But I wanted to see who would respond to it. Because I knew that in order for someone to really be successful in the way that I wanted my company to be successful, I needed somebody who was willing to go after the impossible, or what seemed to be impossible. And so I put the job posting out there that basically the guy that could actually do everything on that list would have been an IT superhero. And luckily, I had a bunch of guys that applied for it, and several of them were pretty darn close to IT superheroes. Frankly, they were really, really good. And I picked my first guy. His name's Corbin. I hired him. It was the longest interviewing process I've ever done with a person, because it was my first guy for my company. I needed to make sure he was good, and he was good, and he is good. He's still my number one guy in my company, and helps me with everything day to day. But he's awesome. I will say hiring a really solid first employee was, I think, one of the best things I could have done at that stage. Luckily, with all the business coming in, and Corbin's sort of out of the box alignment with what I was trying to do with Avajen, made it so that within about a month we had him fully booked, fully busy, and we were ready to hire the next guy. And so by February of 21, I had actually hired my first two guys. And my second guy was also super awesome. Came from the Marines. That's where his IT training was. And by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, the military does a pretty good job training people in cyber security stuff. So just an FYI. But you still got to get the right personality fit. But they do some good training. But yeah, I got my second guy. And then at that point, it was a matter of, okay, I could maybe get the third guy, but I'm not sure. I'd really like to get that first big contract first. And I was working on it on the side. I had talks going back and forth with the company that was soon to become my biggest client. And they were a commercial development group in Denver. And they were a little gun shy at first. I was one guy working out of my house, and then I hired another guy, and I'm talking about hiring another guy, and they're like, cool, so he's got like 2 or 3 guys now, but can he really support what we have? And and I talked to him enough, and it was very honest with him about where I was at and what the capabilities were, but I was also honest with him about the fact that the minute you sign on, my capabilities are going to grow just because you sign on, and I'd really like to make that happen. I think we can really make this work well together. And through that process, they agreed to sign on, and I hired my next guy. And so we went from 1 to 4 in a period of about 6 months. And the contract that they signed for us was crazy. It took every single one of our entire schedules up in order to complete the initial project work for that client for about close to a year. And once we completed that project, the team did a phenomenal job on it. If you called my client today and asked him about it, they would tell you the project went very, very well. Actually, there's a video on my website of them telling people that.
Well,
But
there we go. I'll make sure that link is there for people to
yeah,
see in the show notes. And I think
yeah,
what I've gleaned out of this, and I'm sure others are listening to this as well, have gleaned out of this, is that you've actually used that phrase earlier in this interview. I don't know if you realise that I felt like a superhero. I was going out there, I was doing what I wanted to do. And it's funny how you took that to your next guy, and then your next guy said, I want superheroes. I'm thinking big. I want to be big. In order to close big, I'm going to need big team, big talent, big attitude. And because you went in with that, as opposed to let me just fill a seat on the bench, let me just get someone that can sit on the bench from that. That's almost like hiring a sub as opposed to the superstar, right? You want to go out there and find that superstar each and every time, and I think with that, and people will often ask, they say, well, Gary, how do I find these people? And I think you just nailed it beautifully there, Blake. It was just like, well, make it impossible. Let's see who rises to the top of this, because other people won't bother replying. They'll look at that and go, is he crazy? No one could never do that. And they kind of dismiss themselves out, which is perfect, right? Isn't it? You want to find that thing. So I think it's a really important point there for guys who are listening here. If you're looking for great team members, you don't necessarily have to wonder if you can find a unicorn. You literally just go out and ask for a unicorn. You just make them sound so impossible that you think nobody is going to apply for it, and then they do, and then you have your choices. And I think that's a great entrepreneurial tip there. So Blake, for those who are listening who are budding entrepreneurs, they're thinking about starting, that they're currently working for an MSP and can see themselves doing it themselves, running their own company, or in fact they're already starting their company, been in it maybe 1 or 2 years, but just can't get traction. It could be because they just sound and look like everybody else. But what piece of advice do you have for these guys who, as I said, who are either budding entrepreneurs in the marketplace in this industry, or are in it but just can't get traction?
Sure. Somebody who's just thinking about doing it, you got to be smart about it, but also you got to just do it. If you've been thinking about it for more than a few months and you're not putting pieces in place to get there, you're never going to get there. It's not going to happen for you unless you actually put the pieces in place and start moving. I can't tell you how many people I talk to. Oh, I'm going to start a business someday, and they're 45 years old. And well, when's the first time you said that you were going to do that? Oh, I've been talking about doing this since I was in my 20s. They're never going to have a business, guaranteed. But somebody that really wants, I've had, this is my 4th business, and I've had a couple that I haven't mentioned on here because they didn't go so well. Honestly, I opened up shop, I did a terrible job, I closed down, and there was that. And I think that it's worth noting that, you may not succeed the first time. It is a risk, and you're taking a risk doing it. But it's also a risk working for somebody. If you're trying to get out of working for somebody, consider the risk there too. They can lay you off any moment. Your entire ability to make money is based on someone else's decision making and someone else's thought process. And if you're not perfectly aligned with that and don't really just love their mission and want to be a part of it, and you have this itch inside of you to do your own thing, go do your own thing. There's different risk, but there's risk in everything. So there's just as much risk not doing it. I will say once you get to a certain point where you have built the thing, you've got a few clients, every new client you add, you just reduced your risk, because now you can't get fired by one guy. It takes 5, 10 guys to fire you. And if you're doing something that you love, then you're showing up every day to do the thing you like, and you get to call it a job, and it's harder for someone to get rid of you. Now, there's other risks involved too. You don't have a lot of money. Obviously finances is part of it. You got to figure out how you're going to pay for things. That's a real thing. There's certainly a lot of opportunities to get money, through SBA loans and other sources. If you find investors, that's all good options. But just always try to understand what the risk is to you, and then just go for it, because you only get one life. If you just sit there and think about it your whole life, you're going to get to your old age and you're going to go, yeah, I thought about starting a business one day, and you never did it. The other option is You could start a business. You might fail, but at least at the end of the day, you're going to say, you know what, I did it. And I think that most people will walk away from that scenario much happier with themselves than the person who always dreamed of starting a business and never jumped.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the fail and fail fast, people have heard that phrase, but when you break it down, that is what every entrepreneur needs. And I don't think I even know one entrepreneur in all my years that has made a success from the very, very first one. If they did, they're the unicorn, right? Usually
Right.
we've started a business, we fail fast because we don't want to go down a big rabbit hole. We fail, and we get back up again, and we start again, and we learn from those lessons that what we did
Right.
not do. But you can't do that from
Exactly.
the safety of, and I'm not saying if you're a corporate or you work for someone, it's wrong. What I'm saying is if you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, you can't get the full load until you actually take that step. You can't wait for all the green lights to be green before you hand your notice in and say, I'm going to start. You know, because the lights will change. That's what entrepreneurs are like. You get out there, it's all green, and it's suddenly red again, and you have to do a U-turn.
Yep.
So, yeah, I love those words of wisdom from you, Blake. So I've got a loaded question for you. It's the last question. I always ask my guests this loaded question at the end. You've shared so much with us already today, so I've got one more one for you. You've had a very, very colourful, varied life coming up from your 12-year-old computer guy to where you are today. If you were to give your younger self one piece of advice that had to be the piece of advice, what would that be?
The piece of advice. I mean, honestly, just to get out of my own way. I think nine times out of 10, if there was something holding me back, it was me. And it was whether it was some false idea of who I was as a person, or who I thought other people thought I was, or what I thought other people thought I was capable of. Far too many times I would let that dictate my decision making, and obviously, you know, I've allowed myself to get over those things enough that I've moved forward in the directions I want to in life, and I'm still doing so. But I think there's a lot of people that put way too much weight on the what ifs on a negative side. You know, what if I can't do this? That person thinks I can't do this. Maybe they're right. What if it's goes well, and then such and such happens and it blows up in my face? What if? Those are all things that, you know, if you don't have control over them, just let it go. And the one thing you do have control over is what you do with it. And if there's something you really want, and there's something you want to, impact yourself, your friends, your family, or the world by, go do it. You know, just get out of your own way and go do it, and you'll figure it out. And it's not all going to be a straight line. You're going to have some failures along the way. You're going to have some things that hurt, you know, and that's all normal. But you're not perfect. You're going to screw up, but and you may not have the skills to do it. But if you want it bad enough, you'll go get them. So, you know, just get after it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Blake. Yeah, I totally get out your own way. We're all, whether you're listening to other people, like you said, or you're believing stuff that's in your head that isn't necessarily true, just get out your own way. You can't control it. Deal with it and move forward, because it's holding you back. And I love that bit, Blake. So if people want to get hold of you, Blake, and want to chat with you or potentially work with you, what's the best way of getting hold of you?
Yeah. So you can always get us on my website, which is www.avajen.com. It's Avajen spelled with a J. My wife's name is Jenny, and, you know, I just had to throw her in there. So it's avajen.com. You can also, we have a phone number, 855-755-6444. Tried to make that, you know, almost jingly, so later on we can write the jingle, you know. But yeah, you guys can get a hold of us those places. I'm on LinkedIn as well, Blake Marvin, and I don't really do much on the socials right now, but I'm sure at some point my soon-to-be marketing team will change that for me. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Blake. It's been an absolute honor to have you here, and thank you for sharing your insights with us today.
You bet. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Gary.
No, it's a pleasure. And guys, again, thank you very much for joining us on this episode. Blake has shared so much with us today. We are truly grateful for that. And if you've taken one piece or two pieces or three pieces of little insights that he shared with us, I hope you take that and run with it and take action. Remember, all the knowledge that you're learning from these episodes, from these tech leaders, is just knowledge unless you put some action into it and take the next step to doing so. So I wish you the very best on that. Until the next episode, please make sure that you like anything that you heard on this today. You make sure you leave some comments on what you liked and what you're going to do. Subscribe so you can get more tech leaders, but more importantly, share the messages and insights that Blake has shared with us today so that we can all grow within our glorious industry. So until next time, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Blake has been a fantastic guest, and we shall speak to you on the next episode. Until then, goodbye. See you soon. Bye-bye.